You're watching the Survivors to Thrivers podcast with your host, me, Cranford Blackman. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to recognize domestic violence, whether it's happening to you or to someone you care about. Stay tuned. If you're a survivor of violence and are ready to get control of your life again, you're in the right place at the right time. This is the Survivors to Thrivers podcast with your host, Cranford Blackman. Hello again, everybody. Cranford here. Welcome to another episode of Survivors to Thrivers podcast. This is actually episode number 20. And I want to thank you for sticking with me to keep learning about how to be safer and just to have a better life by learning situational awareness, mindfulness, and just how to take care of yourself. And today what I want to talk to you about is something that some of you may be surprised to learn, that people occasionally don't recognize when they are in an abusive relationship. So I want to go over some of the things that might indicate to you that you are in a abusive relationship. Now, you would think it would be very simple to go, of course people would know. I would know if I was in an abusive relationship. But that's not always the case. Because where you may be in a relationship that you think is loving, and the person that you are in a relationship would never hurt you or never do anything terrible to you, you may not recognize some of the things that they do as abusive. And especially when you love them, you may think, even when they do something abusive, that they didn't mean it. It's not who they really are. It won't happen again. I must have done something wrong. I must have deserved it. And by the way, you never deserve abuse, okay? Just as a quick reiteration, you never deserve abuse. Now, others who are not in an abusive relationship may look at some of their friends and wonder, is something going on there that I could help them with? Is something going on in their relationship where they may need help, or they may not recognize that it is abusive? Well, I found a really good resource that goes over all of these and more, and I'm going to share that with you in the notes below too. But let's start with a couple of things that are really good evidence that you might be in an abusive relationship. Now, as I said, I found a great resource, and it's actually from an organization called the Recovery Village. And as I said, I'm going to put a link to it in the comments below, or in the notes below, okay? But this resource, this page they have about recognizing domestic violence, whether you're the victim or a friend of the victim, it's just really good. Also, how to help yourself get out of it, and more. And I'm not affiliated with the Recovery Village, but I do like this resource they have, and I wanted to share it with you. So here are some notes that I picked up from them. You know, we talk about situational awareness and mindfulness a lot, which means understanding the situation we're in, recognizing not only what's going on around us, but what's going on within us. So I want to share just a couple of bullet points from their resource, and certainly I want you to go look at it yourself. Take some time, read over it, and look at their page too. I'll tell you more about that here in just a minute. But signs of domestic violence, and I'm reading to you a little bit here because, you know, memorizing, that's horrible for me. Anyway, here are some of the things that if you recognize this in your relationship, you may want to do a little more research, or to look at your life a little bit harder and go, is this me? So if someone is intentionally inflicting pain on you, whether it's with their body, hitting you, kicking you, or with an object, hitting you with a stick or whatever. There's a difference in playful wrestling and someone hurting you. So if someone's hurting you, that's a great piece of evidence, okay? And even if they decide to say, oh, that wasn't on purpose, I didn't mean to hurt you that badly, that's still not a good thing. That's a great piece of evidence. And even if it's not a physical pain, maybe you're being humiliated or demoralized. Abuse doesn't have to be just physical. It can be verbal. It can be emotional, psychological. It can even be financial, where money is being held from you in your relationship and you're only allowed to have money at certain times, or if your spouse doesn't allow you to purchase anything, so that you have no control or no use of your own finances. Let's see, being controlled or dominated. Another one is, and I mentioned this briefly a minute ago, when you're blaming yourself for something that your spouse or significant other is doing. Okay, if you're blaming yourself, something is going on. As I said before, you cannot do something that makes it appropriate for them to abuse you. Okay, you're never asking for it. Just if you're blaming yourself, you need to take a hard look at what's going on in your life and in your relationship. And I'll just do one more here. When your personal belongings are being taken from you or hidden from you or even destroyed, removing parts of your personal life like that, making you belong to them more, and not in the wonderful belonging way in a great relationship, but taking your stuff away so that you don't have any ownership of even the things in your life. So look at that as well. Now, like I say, it might be hard to recognize if you've been in a bad relationship for a long time, or several bad relationships. You might not recognize that it's actually abusive. I've known people in my family and friends of mine who have been abused or assaulted, and because of the relationship they were in, they just weren't sure. Is this assault? Is this domestic violence? And they just weren't sure. It's easy for people that are not in this situation to look and go, yeah, that's crazy. Of course, you got hit, you got punched, you got burned, you got locked out of your home. That's abusive. But when you're in it, sometimes it's just hard to see for some. And that's why I'm so glad I can share this resource with you to help you know. Now, many times we have friends or even family members that we look at and wonder, are they in an abusive relationship? Are they the victim of domestic violence? And sometimes we're uncomfortable asking them or mentioning because they can become defensive, right? I was surprised when I was a police officer when I would respond to a domestic disturbance, and it's clear that there's been violence perpetrated or done to one of the partners in the relationship. And it's amazing when you see someone who's standing there with blood coming out of their mouth because they've been hit or whatever, and they will immediately take the side of the attacker. No, it's okay. I don't want any charges pressed. Everything's fine. Everything's okay. We don't want you here, officer. Thank you very much. Everything is not fine if they're bleeding. Everything is not fine if they've been hit. So believe me, if you've never thought that this was possible, someone who's being abused can certainly take the side of their abuser. And that can also be part of what happens with the psychological and emotional control that the abuser is committing against their loved one. But love does not include abuse, physical, emotional, or any sort. So let me go over a couple of the bullet points that were again in the resource that I found. And so here's some things you might notice about a friend or loved one that could indicate to you that they are in an abusive relationship. If they're missing school, work, or other obligations with no excuses or strange excuses, why are they missing so many? If they describe their partner as just really jealous, that might sound nice. He's really jealous. He just thinks the world of me. But being jealous and possessive may not be such a good thing. So it's another thing to be aware of. If they show up and they're always wearing long sleeves, even when it's hot, because that could be hiding bruises from being grabbed, or collars that are up, because that hides bruises from choking. Or maybe they're wearing sunglasses because they have a black eye or something. So if they're wearing stuff that is just doesn't seem right, it might be an indicator. I mean, especially if they normally wear tank tops and now all of a sudden they're wearing long sleeves, it's something worth taking a look at. And if they become irritable or angry when you start talking about their partner, that's defensiveness about being found out, because there can be some just terrible feelings attached with being in that relationship, that I've allowed this to happen to me, or that I've caused this to happen to me. And they can become very defensive about you wanting to ask about or discuss their private life and what's going on. It's really common to hear, it's none of your business, everything's fine, I fell down, or I burned my hand here, or I fell against a cabinet and hurt my wrist. It's very common for them to become defensive. I want to read to you a little section from the Recovery Village's domestic violence resource. And there's a lot more on their site, so please do go look. But I want to read this to you, since we're talking about, if a loved one or a friend or a coworker might be experiencing it. So I'm reading now from their resource. Keep in mind that it's not always easy for victims of domestic violence to admit that they're being abused. And there are many reasons these individuals choose to stay in those relationships. They may be fearful for their safety or that of their children, or they may not want their abusers to go to jail. Some may also be hopeful that the abuse will stop one day, so they choose to stay and wait for change, often in vain. In other cases, abuse may be all the victims know, so they may be afraid of experiencing the unknown by leaving. Regardless of the reason, it's important for you to have patience and understanding to effectively help your loved ones. It just might be shocking for some of you to think that knowing they're in an abusive relationship, they might stay. But when you love someone, you hope they can change, right? I mean, a lot of us have been in that situation, and maybe it wasn't abusive, but it was a bad relationship, and we stayed way too long hoping things would get better, and it didn't. Well, the same can happen in an abusive relationship. And it may also be, just like I just read, that if there's children involved, and maybe it's a husband abusing a spouse, or abusing his wife, and he may tell her, if you call the police, your children will pay for it. I mean, that's horrible, right? But, I mean, it happens. So please do go to this resource, take a look, share it with your friends. Again, as I said, I'm not an affiliate of them. I don't receive anything for telling you about them. But I just looked at this resource. I really liked it. I looked around on their website, and they're actually a recovery center for addiction. And as you may or may not realize, a lot of times, even after getting out of an abusive relationship, there can be problems with addiction to alcohol or drugs. trying to get rid of the pain that had been inflicted. I mean, yeah, your body heals up most of the time, but maybe the emotions and the psychological part don't. And a lot of people, and I've done this before, using something like alcohol to try to stop the pain of what has happened. And maybe people can do it and stop, but a lot of times they can't. And now all of a sudden, along with the pain and challenge of what has happened to them physically or emotionally, they have the added challenge of realizing they're addicted to whatever it is that they're using, whether it's, like I said, alcohol, drugs, whatever. You can be addicted to a lot of things. And the Recovery Village, that's exactly what they do. They have centers around America that help people with that challenge, the challenge of addiction. But take a look at their page, because, they don't only promote themselves. They have resources on their page to show whatever state you're in, places that can help with addiction. So even if you're not going to one of their facilities, you can go on their site and get phone numbers and locations for facilities that are in your area. And it's just wonderful that they do that. I very much appreciate that they do that to help anyone, whether they can come to the Recovery Village or not. So there you go. Not a really long post today. I do want you to take some time and look at that website. It's therecoveryvillage.com. I'll put a link in the notes, as I said. You can click on it and take a look. That will go directly to the resource about domestic violence. And in that, there's also a lot more, what you can do, what to look for, how to help, people you can call. So please do look around. Learn what you can there. I'm very happy to share resources with all of you, my listeners, my LabCalf tribe, so that you can live a better, safer, happier life. Now, something I'd like for you to do, if you've dealt with the challenge of domestic violence and you're comfortable with it, I don't want to ask you to do anything you're uncomfortable with. I would love for you to share in the comments below what it was that helped you recognize, oh my gosh, this is it. I am in a abusive relationship. Let the rest of the LabCalf tribe know. Share, so that maybe something I haven't mentioned, what you say may click for another viewer, another tribe member of ours, who is in need of recognizing they're in a bad situation. And maybe the thing that you say is the one thing that makes it click for them, so that they go, I do need help. I'm in trouble. And it might be what you say that saves their life. The other thing I would like you to do is share this video. Share it with people you may think are abuse victims or in a bad relationship. And also share it with those people who are already survivors of violence. Okay, because as I said, addiction is not just something that shows up after an abusive relationship. It can come after any number of terrible things that happen in our life, whether it's something, terrorist related, whether it was an attack from a stranger. The challenge of living with that pain can push people to addictive behaviors. So please do share this with your friends and family members, especially, as I say, those who are survivors of violence. I'd also love for you to give me a thumbs up on the YouTube channel to help people find me. And then I want you to go over to my normal site, labcalf.com, labcaf.com. and subscribe to my email list so that you can find out when we are putting out new videos like this, when we're putting out new articles, or when we connect with other resources. So please do go over there, subscribe to the email list, and there's some things that you'll get on the email list that I just don't put on the YouTube channel. So please do take a look over there. So until next time, as we keep moving from survivors to thrivers, This is Cranford Blackman reminding you to stay safe and stay strong. See you next time.
To make sure you never miss an episode of Survivors to Thrivers podcast, subscribe at labcaf.com.
Hello again. So, especially survivors of